now we want to talk about affordable housing and what's happening in the country in this whole matter. So it's the end of the month. Some people have started receiving their pay slips and they're already indicating something. Okay? Housing fund levy, gone. And people are asking, so now, this money, where is it going to? Oh, the conversation about affordable housing. Well, we want to focus this time on a developer who's actually participating in affordable housing. Suleiman Shahbal, he's a member of parliament for the East African Legislative Assembly and also the chairman of Gulfcap Real Estate. Mheshimiwa, good morning.
Good morning, Eric. Good to meet you three again. Like I keep saying, you are the three musketeers of morning radio. I'm always happy and challenged to be here.
Karibu sana.
But today I missed CT's morning proverb.
You haven't missed it. It's coming. It always comes right now. CT, what is the day's proverb?
Well, today's proverb, which is the first proverb for the week from the country of South Africa. Today we're in South Africa. And we said, after Somalia, which has the longest shoreline, beach line on the continent. I mean, when you say continent, I'm talking about inland sea. Well, your continent, Madagascar.
See Madagascar.
Apana, those also, but those are islands. It has the longest. But it's, the interesting thing about it is, when you look at the government of South Africa, unlike Kenya, where legislative, Nairobi headquartered, parliament, Nairobi headquartered, executive, Nairobi, they have it differently. The executive is in Pretoria, legislative in Cape Town, judicial, Bloemfontein. So, if you talk about separation of powers, now these guys are even separated geographically. Anyway, the proverb, if you start looking for flies in your food, it means you are full.
If you start looking for flies in your food, it means you are full.
Yes.
Shahbal, what do you make of that?
Clearly, you haven't eaten in River Road.
No, it's a long kitambo.
Hata mimi pia ni kitambo, but when you are eating in the River Road, in all those restaurants there, you don't worry about the flies, you eat.
Yes.
And you move on.
But what do you think the South Africans are saying?
I think South Africa, you know, there's something very interesting. The ruler of Dubai back in the early 80s sent his top 15, 20 men to Singapore. Go and study Singapore. Go and see how these guys live, how they work, how they play, and then come and duplicate this. And they duplicated the economic miracle that is Dubai today. I think we as Africans should send our young people to South Africa and find out where they went wrong. And God help us if we repeat this again. Okay. For your information, the most critical city in South Africa is Johannesburg. It is the center of literally everything.
It is their largest city.
It is their largest city, yes. Commercial.
Yes.
The mayor of Johannesburg didn't even finish Form 4. Are you surprised they have problems? Seriously, I mean, you know, this guy is the chief executive of the city of Johannesburg.
Yep.
He's expected to
understand...
With the greatest
GDP.
With the greatest GDP. He's expected to understand critical issues and pass critical decisions or guide critical decision making. And you bring a guy who has no clue what he's reading. And now we in Kenya have just passed a law, or we're trying to pass a law, I don't know where the status is, that governors don't even need to have degrees. Come on, man, let's get serious. If that is the case, why do we need to send our people to university to go and study medicine or engineering or all those things? They're completely unnecessary. Challenge for the day.
Okay. Started on a high note.
You know how it is when you start a race on your marks, get set, go.
Yeah.
Mheshimiwa has just gone to go.
Yeah.
He's not waiting.
Get set on your marks,
forget it.
Go.
Get it.
But I'll give you an Ethiopian proverb also, because lately I've been having a lot of problems all over the place. It says the elephant does not limp when he's walking on thorns. That's an Ethiopian proverb.
we've had that proverb here,
I see.
and we agree with you.
Good. Great minds think alike.
It would appear.
And fools never differ also.
No, they say fools seldom differ. Yes.
So, Shahbal, you're walking on thorns.
All the time.
Why? It's the nature of life.
It's the nature of challenges. If you set out to do great things, or you set yourself on a long journey or on an important mission, it may be important to you but not important to others. Expect problems. And I keep telling people, if you are walking on the road to Canaan and you come across a big rock on the road, you have only 3 options. Roll over it, get down, remove it, or find another path. But it should not be a stumbling block.
Keep moving.
Keep moving.
You must.
Yeah.
You are, if not the biggest, one of the biggest developers when it comes to the affordable housing projects. You started off, and we had a conversation here about it at the Buxton Point just before you rolled out. I saw some updates last week that the project has actually progressed quite a bit. And then we saw the president launching the Ziwani project, and it was also to be taken up by your company, Gulfcap. So let's start with Buxton. Is it complete?
Phase 1 is complete. 584 apartments are ready. And even before we've moved in, we have won architectural awards and we've won environmental awards. And I believe that we are setting extremely high standards for affordable housing. Had we not had so much political interference in this project, we would probably have rolled it out a lot earlier than we are ready to do now. And the only thing holding us back is infrastructure. The sewage treatment plant that we were expecting the government to do could not be done, so we did it ourselves. It's like I said, we don't allow...
Find a way.
We find a way.
Around the rock.
Yes, and we have found a way.
So phase 1, 584 apartments.
Yes.
And you say these are affordable?
Yes.
Is there any of them that is part of the social housing?
You see, there's a big difference between social housing and affordable housing.
Yes.
The social housing are the slum replacements. Okay. And those are extremely tiny apartments. And the economics of that are completely different. This is targeted at the affordable housing sector. And all of them fall under that category. Yeah.
What is affordable?
That's actually the biggest question. And let us be honest about this, that what is affordable cannot be affordable to everybody. And what is even more important when you talk about affordable is not the selling price of the house, but how much you have to pay for it on a monthly basis. Okay. So whether you're buying a 3 million shilling house or 2 million shilling house, that price already is very low. But the question is, can the buyer afford to pay a 30,000 shilling mortgage? Many buyers cannot afford that. We know that. We know that that is a big challenge. That's a financial challenge. Now, when you look at the affordable housing program, there are 2 components to it. There is finding a way in which we can build houses which are cheap in comparison to the market. That we have done, and this is where government has come in a big way and given, concessional land and given VAT refunds and VAT exemptions and a lot of the other things that government is doing. But the second challenge is, how do we reduce the mortgage payment that the Mwananchi has to pay? With interest rates at 18% today, that's a challenge. So we're looking at how we can find a way to reduce that 30,000 shilling mortgage to 15,000 shilling mortgage. And if we can bring that mortgage to 15,000, for many of the people today who are listening to this radio, who are driving to work or riding on the matatu, many of them are already paying 15,000 shillings a month. That's our second challenge. Now, with the housing fund coming into play, I think we will achieve that very soon. But Kenyans have to be a little patient. This affordable housing thing is such an ambitious program. It will change Kenya, but it will not happen overnight. So let us be a little patient on how we implement this, how we work towards this. And I'm very glad that the State Department of Housing has entered into a consultative discussion with everybody, with the end users, with the developers, with the banks. So we're all working together towards a common goal. And believe me, Eric, this housing thing will change lives in Kenya.
I can imagine that it would, Mheshimiwa. And I think that, unfortunately, we're looking at housing and affordable housing in a silo. And we can't do that. And
How are
this
we
is,
looking at it in a silo?
Because if we're going to say that affordable means that in a month, you will then be able to spend this much to put aside towards housing, while the rest of your needs do not suffer, then everything else that contributes towards those needs has to work in congruence. And we're saying that today, that there's a huge burden when it comes to the cost of living. We're saying that there's a huge burden in so many other things: access to market, roads, the cost of transport, the cost of fuel. If all of those things are not working together to make sure that there's more to go around, then it becomes increasingly difficult to say, I'm going to be able to set this much aside for housing. And so I'm saying that housing cannot work on its own without all of these other aspects coming into play as well.
CT,
Yes,
as President Ruto would say, Kizungu mingi. I'm trying to understand exactly what you're saying.
Okay.
But let me guess.
Can I unpack it for you?
Yes. That's a good way. Unpack it for me. I
see,
honestly didn't understand what.
Let me. So here we
yeah.
are, and I'm saying, you have housing. And we're saying it's a fantastic plan.
Okay.
Great, it is, but there's 15 other things that an individual who's living in Nairobi, in this area where we're saying it's going to be affordable for them, that they have in terms of responsibility. If they have to spend so much on transport, there's clearly something within the transport sector that needs to be fixed. If they have to keep something aside because maybe there will be a problem with health and it is expensive for them to attend to, that also needs to be sorted out. If they have to make sure that education also has to be taken care of for their children and they have to keep something aside, that also needs to be sorted out. We can talk about affordable housing, but that also has to be looked at in the context of everything else that this individual has to do. And I'm saying that all of these things have to work together in order for it to be affordable. The rest of these things also have to be taken into consideration. And how can that happen is my question.
It's true. You're absolutely right. But, if you aspire for anything big as a nation, we need to make sacrifices. And I honestly don't believe that 1.5% is significantly going to impact your education, your food, your transport, and all that. I think we've politicized an economic issue, and we need to come to terms that if we want to be a Singapore, we need to pay some. We need to make some sacrifices. There's no shortcut to that. Come on, guys. We want to build, a housing sector for the whole country. We want to be in a position where 10 years from today, every young person who gets a job aspires to own a house, and we don't want to make some sacrifices. Sometimes we have to be honest with ourselves. You want to buy a house, but you don't want to save. How?
One has to follow the other.
One has to follow the other, and frankly, I don't agree that that paying or putting aside 1.5% of your income is going to affect your transport or your housing, your education or all that. It's a sacrifice we have to make, unfortunately.
But for those things to work, I think this is where the argument comes in. As we are looking at lowering the cost of housing, just look at what the government, for example, has done. What is it that are the big ticket items when it comes to developing houses? Land is a big issue. Cost of inputs is a big issue. taxes are a big issue. So government comes in and says, all right, so let's waive the land cost by providing land. Let's waive some of these taxes by removing VAT. Let's look at how we can accommodate cheaper and better building materials and building technology. So we work on that. You see, that is trying to bring the cost per unit of a house.
Yes.
While at the same time, just like you've said, you've finished 584 apartments in phase 1 of Buxton Point. But the intended beneficiaries may not be able to actually take up these houses because of these other things. How much you're selling the houses for and how much their income is. There's a disparity. So the government has to look at these things holistically. As we're looking at housing on one end, are we looking at what other items are there in somebody's monthly budget? The cost of buying food, the cost of transportation, the cost of education for their children, the cost of healthcare. If those are not being ticked at the same time, then this housing one will become a burden instead of it becoming something that now makes it easier for somebody to live. I think that's a question here. Do you feel, because you're also a leader, a legislator, do you feel that these conversations are happening at the same time?
I don't think we can solve the problems of the world simultaneously. Okay. There have been serious efforts made at addressing, for example, the health problems that we have with the NHIF, which is a positive step in the right direction. And I can see it on the ground. Okay, I'm not talking at a high level. I'm seeing it on the ground, that families which have NHIF are better off. I'm seeing strides in education, okay, that we've made in a big way as a country. But this is not, it is not an either or. Human beings in general do not like to save. They like instant gratification. You and me, all of us. I mean, I've known all along that my daughters are going to university very soon. And I should have started an education plan for them long ago.
Yeah.
I'm worrying about it now.
When they're about to go to university.
When they're about to go to university. Okay. So all I'm saying is that we need to be a bit patient and to look at the bigger picture. Because this housing thing is not, don't just look on the people who are going to be buying the houses. Look at the multiplier effect. The number of people who have been employed in these housing projects, the number of contractors, the number of suppliers. This housing thing is going to re-energize our economy.
Why don't you actually give us that practically? Look at the project that you've just completed,
Yes.
phase 1, and you're going into phase 2, right?
Yes.
How much impact has it had in Kisauni and Buxton?
Okay, over the last 2 years, almost 3,000 people have been employed there. Okay, let's start there.
This is daily employment.
This is on and off.
Earning a daily wage?
Yes, earning a daily wage. Okay. We are going to have close to 100 people permanently employed in Buxton as security, as maintenance, as workers, as all that. Okay. In terms of companies that supplied the Buxton project, there were at least 55 different companies supplying different things. Now, a few minutes before I came in, you had people from TVET here.
Yeah.
Where are all those young people going to work? We're training them to be carpenters and masons and all that. You need projects like this to make the lives of those people who are studying meaningful. If you look at the land itself, look at Buxton. Buxton before had 540 residents. Today, phase 1, 584 already. So we've already surpassed the number of beneficiaries that Buxton had before. By the time we finish, it will be 4 times the number who were living there. Now look at the number of jobs being created there. So I'm a firm believer that this thing is... and by the way, I'm not saying this because I'm a developer. This is a project that I talked about in 2013 when I ran for governor the first time. It was in my contract with the people of Mombasa. We need to build affordable houses.
City.
You know, the conversation about affordable housing is incomplete. Mheshimiwa has talked about us, let's being honest. So I'm going to take it a notch further. Let's be blunt. There's urban renewal, as they say, what some people refer to as slum replacement. Okay? The government took upon itself in a time gone by the role of building such houses through the National Housing Corporation. And if you look at the houses, the places they were built in, they were low rent. They were meant to cater for this. World Bank, in their wisdom and the way they go about their business, they did away with this a long time ago. Now, the problem comes here. All these old estates are not city dwellings. They are urban homes and established ancestral homes for very many people. When I mean ancestral is that even with Mheshimiwa, he'll tell you Buxton, you'll find fourth generation people living in Buxton. Now, the other problem is that with councils and then counties, the rents that they charged at best and as politely as possible could be called subsidized. They were nowhere near the market rates, nowhere. So people who lived there would expect to be paying the same rate, and yet realistically it is not possible. Simply because if a new building is put up at the costs and at the requirements that we currently have, it is not possible for someone to pay what they were paying. The only way they can is if the government, and this is government, it isn't the developer, can come up with a method of subsidizing this entire process or bring in some interesting mixed development that caters for those who would pay these low rents, and it still can't be at the rate they were paying it, and those who are willing to pay a lot more. Now, this caters for that balance so that even the developer also ends up making a profit, because the developer is not developing. This is not for public good. This is for profit.
It's not philanthropy.
Yeah, no, it's not. It's not.
But city, the developer has been given land for free. Developer is not paying for the land.
Yes.
Developer is not paying VAT.
Yes.
Developer is not paying. Some of these costs have been waived.
Actually, there is a balance there. The developer also gives away some of those houses to the county. The county owned the houses previously owned by the council.
Yes.
So there are earnings that they expect. The developer agrees with the county. There's equity here.
Yes.
And the truth of the matter is that it ends up being more. If you look at the value proposition even for the county, the moment you have those numbers increased, everything that the county benefited from the housing goes up.
So what I'm asking is, City, for example, and Shahbal, you can even answer this.
Yes.
The original 530 residents of Buxton and how much they were paying as rent, are they going to be able to pay the same if they got into these new houses? And if not, why not?
The original residents of Buxton were paying between 2,800 to 3,500 shillings.
A month?
A month.
For what size of a house?
Tiny. Okay.
They were tiny two-bedroom houses, really.
Tiny two-bedroom houses. And because they were paying such low rents, the county could not be bothered to maintain those places. They literally became slums. There were, sewage all over the place. There was no proper services, nothing. Okay. Now, there are two options here. Option number one is to do what we call social housing or the slum replacement. If we were to do social housing in Mombasa, then a lot of the people who are paying that sort of numbers can afford to go and continue paying that sort of number. But they wouldn't be satisfied with that. They would want proper, bigger houses, which is what Buxton is today. 30 square meters to 55 to 75 for 3 bedrooms. The issue here is everybody has to find their right economic sweet spot. What is affordable? There are people who live in Buruburu, there are people who live in Kilimani, and there are people who live in Muthaiga. So everybody will gravitate to where they can afford. And the social housing meets somewhere in between. It's not Muthaiga, neither is it at the lower end of the market, but it is somewhere towards the lower end of the market. Now, we as a country have to move into a situation or a place where at least 500,000 families can find a home for themselves. And it has worked in many parts of the world. It will not happen overnight. I'm repeating again, it will not happen overnight. But over the next 10 years, a lot of the problems that we're talking about, the affordability factor, if we can bring down that mortgage from 30,000 to 15,000 and below, there will be hundreds of thousands of families that will be lining up and will be able to afford this. Already in the Bomayangu platform, there are 330,000 applicants. 330,000 applicants. And remember that a lot of people have not applied because they feel they have no chance of getting.
They're all hopeful.
They're all hopeful.
Yep.
So the desire and the demand is there. And I'm repeating again, as Kenyans, we have to be patient. This thing is not going to happen overnight. The challenges that we are facing are real challenges that have to be addressed step by step. But we will get there.
You're urging patience. You're saying this will take time for us to start realizing the dividend of this entire program. How long?
A little bit of correction. We are already seeing the dividends of this program going on now. But before we went on the break, you asked me a question. What about the Buxton residents? You know, phase one, out of the 540 former residents, 60 came in and bought. I am confident that by the time we finish phase two, a lot more will have come in, because by then we will have come up with a financing mechanism for them. I don't want to talk about it today, but this is something that we are all working on very aggressively within our organization and with financial institutions. But like I said, first we have to prove that this thing is doable. Now, all those people who are talking about a lot of negativity about Buxton, today they're seeing what has come up there, and they're seeing, when I talked about a lifestyle, that we can have affordable housing that is actually very nice. Okay? It's not just a bunch of boxes. Now they're seeing what we're talking about. So the reality is beginning to dawn on them. And I am confident that with the new housing fund and with the new energy that we are seeing from the State Department for Housing, that we will also come up with the financial solutions that will enable more Buxton residents to buy in these estates. That is where we're heading. Yeah.
Must they own the houses?
And why not?
Must they?
Why
Can they-
not?
can they
Because you
opt
see,
not to?
no, they
You see, they didn't own the previous houses.
yes.
Must they own this new one?
Then if they're becoming renters, then what's the difference? I want to see families own their own homes. You see, Eric, I keep saying a million times, there is no greater security you can leave your family than a roof over their head. If you own a house today, even if you have a 30-year mortgage, the day you drop dead, okay, you got hit by the bus, you got a heart attack, whatever the story may be, you died. Insurance immediately pays off your mortgage. You've left your family with a roof over their head. Even if they eat ugali and sukuma wiki every day, but they're in the safety of their own home. There is nothing you can leave your family more than a roof over their head. That's where Kenyans should be heading to.
Sure. Innocent asked the question. I think I'm going to use it to form the basis of part two of my question. And he says, let's imagine you have a worker, because let's get down to the nitty gritty. We can talk about things and put them in the sky, but down to the nitty gritty is what makes the difference here. A worker is earning 40,000 shillings per month. All right. A worker has a family. He's got children. These children have needs, obviously. How will they get just using Buxton as an example, and you can replicate that for around the country, how will they be able to afford to own these units that go for 2.9 million shillings, for example, if we can break it down to the shillings and cents for it to make sense?
That's a good question. Let's just do a quick mortgage calculation here. If you'll allow me, it will take me 1 minute. Okay, we're talking about 2.9 million, correct?
Yes.
Let's round it off to 3 million.
Okay.
At an interest rate of 9%, which is what, and we say 25 years. Okay, calculate. That gives you a mortgage payment of 25,000 shillings
a month.
Per month.
Yeah.
Okay. The average amount that a family should spend, this is a global benchmark, is 30%
Of their income.
of their income. So 40 multiplied by 30% is 12,000 shillings.
Yes.
So this is double what they should be paying.
Yes.
But that's what I kept saying, that we are working on a financial solution to bring this down from 25 to the 15,000 shilling mark that I'm looking for. And I can assure you, we're going to do it very soon.
But actually,
But
even
the
this
starting point,
calculation-
Eric,
hold on,
Eric,
hold
Eric,
on.
wait.
The
The
calculation was
the-
with 9%, was it not?
Yes, that's
I know
what
the 9%.
KMRC is offering today.
This is just on the KMRC side.
Yes.
The rest of the market is way above 13%.
Correct. But that's where government comes into play. KMRC is a government initiative.
Right.
Okay. The housing fund is what is going to help lower this even more. Okay. What I'm saying is, let's start first at the 2.9 million. Where in Kenya today can you get a house for 2.9 million in a nice environment, other than in the affordable housing programs? Where?
The fact
So
that you
that's already a success indicator.
I think
that
what
we
we
have
should-
managed to bring down a house to 2.9 million shillings.
I think the uncomfortable conversation that we don't want to address is the fact that even if you have a house that's 2.9 million shillings compared to the rest of the what would be clearly expensive market, we don't want to address the fact that the majority of Kenyans today still cannot afford that 2.9 million shilling house. And I think that's the uncomfortable conversation that we need to be having. That even though, yes, fantastic, we've been able to get housing in different parts of the country that cost 2.9.3 million shillings, the uncomfortable part is that still the majority of Kenyans cannot afford to pay for that. And which brings me back to my original question, which I will ask if that's the only question I ask today, that isn't it supposed to be that we are looking at how all of these other things can work together in a cycle to make sure that you're making life across board more affordable, so that yes, when 2.9 million shillings comes knocking in terms of a mortgage, that I can still save towards that. It's uncomfortable, but it's necessary to be had.
But doesn't that just point to the reality again, as you say? When you talk about what you've just said, you're talking about cost of living. If the cost of living was lower, what it then means that many things would be affordable.
Many more things would be affordable.
Yes.
And that's what I'm saying, that all of these things have to work together.
And also, if you're looking at the building industry, yes, the government may come in and subsidize it by way of rebating this, removing this, lowering this and the other. And by virtue of just the numbers that are being built, it is hoped the economies of scale would come in. And so you'd be able to lower the cost. But it doesn't quite happen that way.
And
Not quite.
It doesn't happen that way.
No,
And we
because
say- and
the
it doesn't mean it can't.
the cost, all these things require money. Buying that money to get these things, unfortunately, is not cheap. So how do you twist around that one? Because we've had this discussion. It comes down to money. Where you're going to get the money, it's expensive. So what are you going to do?
I think when you start by saying the uncomfortable subject, there's nothing uncomfortable about it.
Oh, not for us, because the people who are living on this other side
No,
of the
no, no, no,
uncomfortability
no, no,
understand.
no, let's not-
Those who are in a
no, when
position
we talk
to make
about
the
it-
environment conducive may not want to have that uncomfortable conversation.
No,
I'm
it's
saying
not.
we must.
It's not an uncomfortable conversation, because the minute you start saying uncomfortable, it's as if we're running away from it. No, we are addressing it. And I've said again, the housing side, there are two components to it: the supply and the demand. The supply is, how do we bring down houses to a level which is cheaper than market? 2.9 million is definitely cheaper than market. That's number one. We've achieved that, or we're getting there through lower cost of land, the government subsidies. That we've achieved. The second component, which we have not achieved, is how do we bring that mortgage rates down from the 25,000, the 30,000, down to the 10 to 15,000 range. And what I'm saying is, just like it took a bit of time for us to prove that we can deliver houses at 2.9, it will take a little bit of time for us to find the mechanism to bring that mortgage payment down. There's nothing uncomfortable about it. That's the reality of the challenge that we face. And we're not running away from it. I'm certainly not running away from
That's
it.
the point, Suleiman.
Yeah.
You are not running away from it. Because if we are talking about the houses that people dream, and the house, you see, there's incongruence here. You want a house that cannot realistically be built at the cost you want. The house that can be built at the cost that somebody wants will not be what you want. It will be something of a much lower standard. Now, this, in my mind, would form the uncomfortable position. And this is where communicating and getting people to understand these realities are. That given the money that you can afford, the sort of housing you will get is this.
Yep.
So you know from the get-go. So it's not as though I have 3 million shillings and I'm going to live in Nyali. You are not going to be able to live in Nyali. It's not complicated. You're not even going to be able to live in Maweni. It's not, that's in Mombasa. All I'm saying is, with these conversations, there is the need to tell the would-be occupants, the would-be buyers, this reality, that in Buxton, given where Buxton is situated, you will not be able to afford it. On the other hand, if you go to Magongo, where similar houses are going to be built, and the majority of houses will be of that nature, you may be able to. But then the moment you say that, you'll say, Ubaguzi. Why is it that it isn't Ubaguzi? It's reality. It's what you can afford. You see, this issue of what you can afford is not a conversation people want to have. Everyone wants to feel they can afford everything. You can't. No one can. It's a question of what is going to fit your pocket now. Make it fit that pocket, but then the government has to come in.
And that's why I was asking that question. Must we look at these houses? So, yes, developer puts up the houses, right? Must those houses be off-taken by individuals? Can they not be off-taken by, county governments, by national housing? And then we pay rent. Yes, of course, you'll say that the best thing that I'd want to leave my family is a decent house. Yes. But you see, the point is right now I can't afford it. How can we work together? How can we work together in such a way that this 2.9 million shilling Buxton house, I can pay it, but then the government has already waived the 900,000. I'm looking for 2 million or something like that over time.
But then the government will have to pay the developer, because
when you talk about government, who is government? It's taxpayers. It's me and you.
That's why we're doing the 1.5. You see, the government is owning all these things. Just like if the government were to, the example that you gave earlier, these estates that we're talking about that were built in Eastlands were owned
all
by
over the country,
municipals, right? The municipals owned the homes.
Yes.
They had the asset. Mombasa still will have the asset of Buxton. But a part of it, you're having people paying rent in a way. And then the other part, people who can afford buy. So you're catering for both sides of the equation. Instead of just looking at now, Suleiman Shahbal now sitting there with stock and is trying to sell them at 2.9 million shillings. And there's only a limited number of people who can afford 2.9 million shillings, and maybe they don't want to live in Buxton, or they don't want to own a house in Buxton.
You know, the conversation about this being a work in progress, it is. Because before this affordable housing conversation began, there was urban renewal. You know, the agreements and my friend, it's a very complicated, tedious affair to get to the point where you're working out even these figures and agreeing on who takes what, who gets what, who's given what. But the affordable housing conversation, and here, Suleiman is right, it shows the progress that has been made.
Yep.
Meaning, we've moved and said, okay, government, this thing that you want to do, you have to come in. And you have to pay. It's not a question of just coming in. Land is good, but you have to go a little beyond land. You've got to do something else for this thing to be able to be afforded by the people you want. And everybody agrees you have to. Now, the alternative is the government decides that anyone who is in the affordable housing business does not pay any form of tax whatsoever for anything that they need in their building. That will drastically bring down the cost of these things. And anything else that the government gains from this, they say, you do not have to pay. Even work out special rates in banks. Now, do you think that's going to happen?
My dream is very clear, Eric.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to deviate from this. It is my ambition that as many Kenyans as possible must own their houses. I want these young guys who are now in their cars or in their matatus driving to work to own, even if it is a bed sitter, let them pay 6,000 shillings a month mortgage payment. They own it. Okay, 5 years from today, they are earning a lot more. They sell that bed sitter, buy a 1-bedroom. Okay, 4 years later, they get married, they buy a 2-bedroom. That's going to be the Kenyan dream, and we're going to make it happen. And no thorns on the way is going to stop us from achieving that goal. Okay, let's just be real. There's a price to pay for everything, and we have to work together as a country to find solutions, not to try and make this whole thing fail. This is the best thing that's ever happened in Southeast Asia. This is what has changed the lives of people in Singapore, in Malaysia, in China, in India. That's what they call the American dream, that every family must own their own home and eventually build equity. So by the time you reach your 50s or your 60s, you sell that house and you go back to shags with some money to retire. I think I was here on that program, on the same program, when somebody said that he came to Buruburu when he was 25 and he left Buruburu when he was 60, went back to shags after paying rent for 40 years. That's not going to happen if we can avoid it. So I keep repeating again, this is the best thing that Kenya can do. It's not going to be easy. We are going to have challenges. We've already shown that we can build good, affordable housing in a first-class environment. Come to Buxton. I'm inviting you to come to Buxton and see the lifestyle that we're giving and tell me where in today's Africa can you get a house for 2.9 million in such an environment. So we've shown that it is doable.
So, Suleiman, I thought you were going to tell us, come to Buxton and buy a house.
Come and buy a house.
Why are you telling us to just come and see the house?
Mwanzo ni mtu wa Nairobi, buy a house in Starehe. Okay. And by the way, we're not sitting on any stock, Eric. The demand far exceeds the supply. That's actually the biggest problem. Buxton was sold out within 2 weeks. Okay.
This 584
584 within
gone.
2 weeks, gone. The demand in Starehe is more than we can meet. So people are walking the talk.
Yeah, but what people are buying these houses? You see, they're not the people
good
for
question.
whom...
No. I know where you're heading.
Yes.
The people who are buying these houses, one house, one ID, one house.
Through Bomayangu.
Bomayangu is being implemented now. Okay. But, there are people who come and say, oh, it is the rich people who came and bought. No, it is not the rich people who came and bought. If we had more time, I would have given you the statistics. You'd be amazed.
I personally have no problem with more than one person, someone buying more than one house.
No, I have a problem because my dream is to make sure that as many families as possible own homes. I do not want an estate where one guy owns 50 apartments and he's collecting rent. No. The idea is to have, people owning their own homes. They are paying for it slowly and building wealth for themselves over time.
So we have 584 apartments that have been sold to 584 homeowners.
Correct.
And are they residents? Are they intending to live here?
I would say 90% of them are coming to live there. Yeah.
The housing fund, all right, so now the deductions are taking place. And the whole conversation has been from the State Department of Housing. Once we get this pool of money, we'll be able now to help roll out, finance developers and offtake from the developers. Do you see this working seamlessly?
Yes, I see it working. And, by the way, we set up an association of affordable housing developers. And unfortunately, they elected me chairman. Unfortunately, maybe because I'm a big mouth, And what we're going to and I'm a member of this task force to see how we can effectively and fairly allocate the use of these funds. And it's going to go through a public participation process. And the idea is very clear that how do we make this as transparent as possible? How do we make this as fair as possible? And how do we make this the most economically beneficial fund that we have in the country? I think it's a step in the right direction.
Suleiman, you're a man of faith. I can see that.
Yes, I am.
And you're a man of vision. I can also see that, because to have a vision, you actually must have faith. The two tend to go hand in hand.
Yeah.
You envision and you now believe, then you see how you can make this work. The conversation that I feel is not had adequately is what we normally call public participation. How it is we inform, brief, not once, over a period of time, all these individuals who live in these estates, to the point where they actually understand exactly what's happening. And the reality Ndu was referring to understand with what you believe you ought to be paying, if it's 1,700 or this is what it'll get you, not this. Okay? Now, that conversation, enough of it hasn't been had, because the idea that people have is because the reason why they keep repeating is because mentally they haven't moved from it. There's this, it's akin to magic thinking, where you think, I'll pay 2,500 and I live in a 3-bedroom house.
As you conclude, respond to very many questions on social media. Why must I own a home in towns and I can build a bigger house in Shags for 2.9 million shillings?
Because unfortunately, you'll spend the next 40 years of your life in town. So that house in Shags is going to be good for your relatives, not good for you. So you may as well build your own equity here and build your own home here. And for heaven's sake, you owe your kids a decent place to live in. So stop talking about fantasies and live in reality. Next question. No, but it's true. It's true, isn't it? Okay.
Starehe, how many units in Starehe?
Starehe will be approximately 6,500 units.
That's
out of which at least 2,000 are going to be social housing units.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That is the presidential directions.
There's no minutes.
There's no minutes.
No.
It's a pity, because I really wanted him to explain the social housing.
What is social housing?
Yes.
Next time, come we talk about social housing.
Will do.
Suleiman Shahbal, thank you very much for joining us. Now, when mwanasiasa tujazungumza siasa, you'll tell us about the EALA. When last you were here, you were campaigning to be elected by Kenya's parliament to represent us at EALA. Would like to know, what have you been doing out there in Arusha? In fact, when are you in Arusha if you're building houses in Nairobi? That's the conversation. Suleiman Shahbal, Member of Parliament at the East Africa Legislative Assembly and Chairman of Gulfcap Real Estate, has been our guest this morning talking about affordable housing.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.